married for 2 years, yet never touched, until the millionaire reached for her hand. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories like this one. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to the main character. For 2 full years, she had been married to a man who never touched her. On paper, she was Mrs. Carter, the lawful wife of a self-made millionaire, whose name appeared regularly in business magazines and financial headlines. In real life, she lived like a quiet guest in his mansion, walking past marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows without ever feeling at home. Every night, she slept alone, not because of an argument, not because of betrayal, but because that was the rule. 2 bedrooms, 2 schedules, 2 lives running side by side, never crossing. When people asked how long they had been married, she answered politely, 2 years, and smiled just enough to look convincing. No one ever guessed that in those 2 years, her husband had never once held her hand, not even on their wedding day, especially not on their wedding day. That night had been formal, efficient, and cold. The vows were spoken, the documents were signed, the photographs were taken, and when the guests finally left, he had nodded once and said, "You may choose whichever room you like. The contract is clear." The contract. She still remembered the weight of it in her hands. 12 pages. Clean, precise, unforgiving. This was not a marriage of love. This was an agreement. She received security, financial stability, and a respected name. In return, she would play the role of the perfect wife in public and ask for nothing in private. No affection, no expectations, no physical contact. And she had agreed. Tonight, however, something felt different. The ballroom was filled with warm light and low music, crystal glasses clinking softly as executives and donors gathered for the annual charity gala. She stood beside her husband, dressed in a simple evening gown, her posture straight, her expression calm. From the outside, they looked flawless, a powerful couple. A woman nearby leaned in and smiled. "You two are such a beautiful pair," she said warmly. "I can tell he adores you." The words hung in the air. Her husband did not answer right away. For a brief moment, she thought he would do what he always did. A polite nod, a distant smile, silence. Instead, she felt something warm close around her fingers. She froze. His hand had reached for hers, not accidentally, not hesitantly. He held her hand firmly, as if claiming something that had always been his, and said evenly, "Thank you. I am very fortunate." Her heart skipped, then stumbled. This was not in the contract. For 2 years, she had trained herself not to hope, not to imagine, not to feel. And yet, in that single second, with dozens of eyes watching and his hand wrapped around hers, everything she had buried stirred awake. She looked at him, searching his face for explanation, but his expression remained unreadable. And that was when she realized something had changed. Not in the room, not in the crowd, but in him. And whatever this moment meant, it was only the beginning. She had not married him for love. She had married him because she was running out of time. 2 years ago, before the mansion, before the gala dresses and silent breakfasts, her life fit inside a small 2-bedroom apartment on the south side of town. The paint peeled near the windows, the heater rattled through the winter, and every month, the bills arrived like quiet threats she could not outrun. Her mother had been sick for years, not the kind of illness that makes headlines or earns sympathy, but the slow, grinding kind that drains savings one prescription at a time. Doctor visits, physical therapy, medication that insurance refused to fully cover. Each receipt felt heavier than the last. She worked 2 jobs then, one during the day, one at night. She smiled at customers, apologized for things that were not her fault, and counted tips in the dark when she came home, hoping the numbers would somehow change if she looked at them long enough. They never did. The day she met him, she was not thinking about marriage. She was thinking about eviction notices and hospital appointments, and how much longer her body could hold up under exhaustion. He had been clear from the beginning, almost brutally so. "This is not romance," he told her, sitting across from her at a long table made of dark wood. "This is an arrangement." He explained everything in the same calm tone he used in boardrooms. He needed a wife, not for affection, but for stability, for public image, for reasons he did not fully explain and she did not dare to question. In return, he would cover her mother's medical care, fully. No deadlines, no conditions hidden in fine print. She remembered gripping the edge of the chair to steady herself. She should have walked away. She knew that. Any sensible person would have. But sensible people did not watch their parents fade because they could not afford one more treatment. So she listened. He slid the contract across the table. 12 pages. Clean language. No tricks. Just boundaries. No emotional expectations. No physical contact. Separate bedrooms. Appear together only when necessary. Privacy respected on both sides. At the bottom, a signature line waited. This marriage will exist only on paper, he said. Nothing more. She asked one question. Only one. How long? As long as needed, he replied. Or until one of us decides otherwise. That night, she sat alone for hours, staring at the contract while her mother slept in the next room, breathing unevenly. She thought about pride, about love, about the kind of life she had imagined for herself when she was younger. Then she thought about hospital hallways and overdue bills, and the look in her mother's eyes when she tried to hide the pain. In the end, the choice did not feel like a choice at all. She signed. From that day forward, her life changed in every way except the one that mattered most. She moved into his house, but not into his world. She learned the schedule of the staff. She memorized which events required her presence and which did not. She became skilled at standing half a step behind him, smiling without speaking, existing without intruding. He was never cruel, never raised his voice, never crossed the lines he had drawn. In some ways that made it harder, because indifference left no bruises, only distance. Over time, she stopped expecting more. She told herself this was enough, that security was a form of happiness, that love was something other people could afford. And yet, standing beside him at the gala, with his hand wrapped around hers for the first time, she felt the fragile balance she had built begin to crack. She wondered if he remembered the contract, and she wondered, for the first time in 2 years, whether she still wanted to be protected by it. The contract governed everything. From the outside, their marriage looked effortless. Inside the house, it ran on rules as precise as a business operation. They rarely spoke in the mornings. Breakfast was taken at opposite ends of a long dining table, sunlight pouring in through tall windows while silence sat between them like a third presence. When he left for work, she nodded politely. When she left later, she did so quietly, as if sound itself might cross a boundary she was not meant to touch. The bedrooms were on opposite wings of the house. Hers was modest, chosen by her, untouched by luxury beyond necessity. His was larger, farther away, guarded by distance and closed doors. In 2 years, she had never stepped inside it, not once. She learned his habits without meaning to, the way he preferred black coffee, the exact time he returned home on weekdays, how he loosened his tie the moment he crossed the threshold, as if shedding the weight of the world room by room. He, in contrast, seemed to know almost nothing about her, and perhaps that was intentional. The contract stated that emotional involvement was unnecessary and discouraged. He followed that clause with discipline. No questions about her day, no comments on her silence, no curiosity that might blur the lines they had agreed upon. When they attended public events, everything changed. He would offer his arm, always at the same angle, always with the same practiced ease. She would place her hand lightly on his sleeve, never on his skin. Cameras would flash, smiles would appear. They looked like a couple who belonged to one another. The moment the doors closed behind them, the performance ended. Once, early in their marriage, she had tripped slightly while stepping out of a car. Instinctively, she reached for him. His body stiffened, not in anger, but in surprise. He steadied her without touching her directly, his hand hovering just close enough to help without crossing the line. "I am sorry," he said afterward, his voice controlled. "I should have warned you. Physical contact makes things complicated." She nodded, embarrassed, and never reached for him again. Over time, she adapted. She stopped flinching at the distance, stopped noticing the lack of warmth, stopped expecting anything beyond what had been promised. Or, so she told herself. Late at night, when the house was quiet and her thoughts grew louder, she would remember the way his hand had felt around hers at the gala. Firm, steady, intentional. That single moment replayed itself against every rule they had built. The next morning, she found the contract folded neatly on her desk. She had not placed it there. He had. A reminder. She read through it again, slowly. Each clause felt heavier than before. This marriage will remain professional in nature. No physical intimacy shall be expected or implied. Either party may terminate the agreement with reasonable notice. The words were unchanged. Only she was. That evening she saw him in the study, standing by the window, jacket still on, city lights reflecting faintly across the glass. She hesitated at the doorway, unsure why she had stopped there at all. Was yesterday necessary? She asked quietly. He turned to face her, his expression carefully neutral. Yes, he replied after a moment. Appearances matter. She nodded. That should have been enough. But as she turned to leave, his voice stopped her. You handled yourself well, he said, at the gala. It was the first compliment he had ever given her. She did not know how to respond. She only managed a soft thank you before retreating to her room, closing the door behind her with more force than intended. That night, sleep did not come easily, because for the first time since signing the contract, she realized something had shifted. Not in the rules, not in the house, but in the quiet space between them. And she sensed, with a mix of fear and hope, that the boundaries he had built so carefully were no longer as solid as he believed. Life inside the house settled into a rhythm that felt permanent. Weeks passed, then months. Days folded neatly into one another, each one resembling the last. If anyone had asked, she would have said she was comfortable, safe, provided for, and in many ways, that was true. But comfort was not warmth. She learned how to exist quietly beside him. She learned which hours the house felt empty, even when it was full. She learned that silence could be louder than arguments if it stretched long enough. Some mornings, she woke before dawn and padded softly through the kitchen, making coffee she never drank herself. She poured it into a plain ceramic mug and left it on the counter at exactly 6:30. He never commented on it. He simply took the mug and left the house. She told herself it meant nothing. When he returned late from work, she sometimes left a light on in the hallway without realizing why. He never mentioned it, but the light was always turned off before morning. They moved around each other with careful precision, never colliding, never touching, as if both understood that the smallest mistake might shatter the fragile order they depended on. And yet, cracks appeared. One evening she came down with a fever. Nothing serious, just enough to leave her dizzy and unsteady. She tried to hide it, unwilling to disrupt the balance they had built. But she misjudged the stairs. She missed a step. He caught her before she could fall. For a brief second, his arms were around her, solid, real, unmistakable. She felt his breath hitch. She felt his hands tense, then release her almost immediately, as if burned by the contact. "You should rest," he said, stepping back. "I will have someone check on you." She nodded, embarrassed, grateful, and strangely hollow all at once. That night, a tray appeared outside her bedroom door. Soup, medicine, a glass of water, no note, no explanation. She ate alone, listening to the quiet of the house, wondering why kindness felt more dangerous than cruelty. At public events, their roles sharpened. She wore gowns chosen by stylists who never asked her opinion. She stood at his side while people praised him, toasted him, congratulated him on deals and acquisitions. Occasionally, someone would turn to her and ask what it was like to be married to such a powerful man. She answered politely, carefully, always vaguely. "He is very dedicated," she would say. No one ever asked how lonely dedication could be. Over time, she stopped trying to impress anyone. She focused instead on being invisible without being forgotten, present without being personal. Still, there were moments she could not explain. Once, during a board dinner, a man laughed too loudly at her expense, making a comment about her background that was meant to be harmless and was anything but. Before she could respond, her husband spoke. "That is enough," he said calmly. The table fell silent. He did not look at her. He did not raise his voice. But the message was clear. The man apologized. Later that night, she thanked him. "You did not have to," she said. "I did," he replied. "You are my wife." The words settled heavily between them. Not my partner, not my companion, my wife. The title carried weight, responsibility, distance, ownership without intimacy. That night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering when protection had begun to feel like possession, and why part of her felt relieved by it. The next morning, she found the contract missing from her desk. Panic rose before reason could catch up. She searched the drawers, the shelves, her bag. Finally, she found it in the study, locked inside his desk drawer. He had not destroyed it. He had not changed it. He had simply taken it out of her reach. When she asked him about it later, his answer was brief. "You do not need to read it every day," he said. "Nothing has changed." She wanted to believe him, but she could not ignore the small shifts anymore. The way his gaze lingered just a second longer than before. The way he seemed more aware of her presence, even when he pretended not to be. Something was moving beneath the surface of their carefully constructed arrangement, and whether either of them was ready or not, it was only a matter of time before it demanded to be seen. The charity luncheon was supposed to be simple, an afternoon event, limited press, a room full of donors who preferred quiet generosity to public praise. She had attended dozens like it before, standing beside him, smiling when expected, remaining invisible when not. This time, however, something felt wrong from the moment they arrived. The venue was smaller than usual, a private dining hall overlooking the river. The tables were set close together, conversations overlapped. There was no place to retreat once seated. As she took her chair beside her husband, she noticed the looks. Not the curious ones she was used to, but something sharper. Measuring, evaluating. A woman across the table leaned forward, her smile thin. "So," she said lightly, swirling the wine in her glass, "you must be the wife." It was not a question. "Yes," she replied calmly. The woman glanced at her husband, then back at her. "You are very understated," she said, eyes flicking briefly to her dress. "I suppose that is intentional." A few people chuckled, softly, politely. She felt the familiar urge to shrink, but she did not. She straightened her posture and met the woman's gaze. "I find simplicity practical," she said. The woman smiled wider. "Of course, I just assumed someone in your position might enjoy more refinement." Her husband said nothing. That silence cut deeper than the words. The conversation moved on, but the damage had already been done. Throughout the meal, comments like that continued. Small, casual, easy to deny if confronted. Questions about her education, her background, how she had adjusted to a life she clearly had not been raised for. Each one landed carefully, like a blade wrapped in silk. She answered with restraint, with dignity. She did not look at her husband again. Toward the end of the luncheon, a man at the far end of the table raised his glass. "To strategic marriages," he said with a grin. "Some partnerships are simply efficient." Laughter followed. This time, it was louder. Her breath caught. She felt heat rise behind her eyes, but she refused to let it show. She reached for her water glass, hands steady despite the noise around her. That was when her husband finally moved. He set his glass down slowly. The sound was soft, but it carried. "I would advise against speculating about my marriage," he said evenly. The room fell quiet. "My wife is not a strategy," he continued. "She is not a convenience, and she is certainly not a topic for amusement." No anger, no raised voice, just authority. The man flushed and lowered his glass. Apologies followed, mumbled and awkward. The luncheon ended soon after. In the car ride home, neither of them spoke. She stared out the window, watching the city blur past, replaying every word in her mind. She told herself she should be grateful. He had defended her. He had done more than the contract required. But gratitude did not erase the hurt. When they reached the house, she did not follow him inside. Instead, she stood by the door, keys still in her hand. "I did not need saving," she said quietly. He turned to her, surprised. "I know," he replied. "Then why did you do it?" she asked. He hesitated. That alone was an answer. "Because they were wrong," he said finally. She nodded slowly. "So am I." Before he could respond, she continued. "I agreed to be your wife on paper," she said, "not to be diminished in public." "You were not diminished," he said firmly. "I felt like I was," she replied. Silence filled the space between them. "I can leave," she said after a moment. "If that would make things easier." His jaw tightened. "That is not what I want." The words surprised them both. She searched his face, looking for certainty, for clarity, for anything solid to hold on to. "What do you want?" she asked. He did not answer. That night, she packed a small bag and placed it by her bedroom door. Not to leave yet, just in case. For the first time since signing the contract, she allowed herself to consider a future where she was no longer willing to disappear. And somewhere down the hall, alone in his study, her husband realized that the rules he had written to protect himself were beginning to cost him something he had never intended to lose. The house felt different that night. Not quieter, not louder, just heavier. She lay awake in her bed, fully dressed, the small bag still resting by the door where she had left it. She told herself she was only being prepared, that she would not actually leave. But the fact that she had packed it all changed something inside her. Down the hall, the study light remained on long past midnight. He had not gone to sleep either. For the first time in 2 years, the distance between their rooms felt less like a rule and more like a choice, one that could still be reversed or permanently sealed. She heard his footsteps in the hallway just after 1 a.m. They stopped outside her door. Her heart began to pound, not with fear, but with uncertainty. He had never come to her room before, not once. The contract had made that clear. There was a pause, a long one, then a knock, soft, careful. She sat up slowly. "Come in," she said, her voice steady despite the tension running through her. He opened the door but did not step inside right away. He stood at the threshold, hands at his sides, as if crossing that line required permission he was not sure he had. "I saw the bag," he said quietly. She did not pretend otherwise. "It is only in case," she replied. "In case of what?" he asked. "In case I decide I cannot do this anymore." The words hung between them. He finally stepped inside, stopping several feet away. The space between them felt deliberate, measured, familiar. "I never wanted you to feel trapped," he said. She let out a small, humorless breath. "You did not trap me. I chose this. I knew exactly what I was agreeing to." "Yes," he said, "and I let you believe that was enough." She looked up at him then, really looked at him. For the first time, she noticed how tired he seemed. Not the polished exhaustion of long work days, but something deeper, something older. "Why did you need this marriage so badly?" she asked. "Not the image, not the convenience, you." He hesitated, then moved to the chair near her window and sat down. He did not look at her as he spoke. "I was married once before," he said. The words were quiet, but they changed the air in the room. "She loved the idea of me," he continued. "The success, the control, the safety, but not the man underneath it." He paused. "When things became difficult, when I stopped being useful, she left. Not suddenly, gradually. She withdrew first, then she disappeared." She listened without interrupting. "I learned that intimacy creates leverage," he said, "and leverage can be used as a weapon." "So you built a marriage without intimacy," she said softly. "Yes." There was no pride in his answer, only honesty. "I thought if I controlled the terms, nothing could hurt me again," he continued. "No expectations, no closeness, no loss." She swallowed. "And did it work?" He finally looked at her. "For a while," he said. Silence followed. She shifted on the bed, choosing her words carefully. "You protected yourself," she said, "but you also erased me." His expression tightened. "That was never my intention." "But it was the result," she replied. "I became a role, a solution, not a person." He nodded once. "I see that now." The admission was quiet, but it mattered. She stood slowly, closing some of the distance between them, not touching him, just standing closer than before. "I never asked for your heart," she said. "I respected the boundaries, even when it hurt." "I know," he said. "And yet," she continued, "when you held my hand at the gala, and when you defended me at the luncheon, you crossed those boundaries yourself." "I did," he admitted. "Why?" He did not answer right away. "Because I could not stand the thought of losing you," he said finally. The words settled deep. Not the contract, not the arrangement. Her. She exhaled slowly. "Then you need to understand something," she said. "I cannot go back to pretending that distance is enough." He stood up, his movements careful. "I am not asking you to stay," he said. Not tonight. Not like this. She met his gaze. What are you asking then? He took a step closer, still no touch. I'm asking for time, he said, to learn how to be present without controlling everything, to choose you without hiding behind rules. She searched his face for the cold certainty she had known for 2 years. It was gone. Instead, there was something fragile, unsteady, real. She did not answer him right away, but she reached down, picked up the bag by the door, and placed it back in the closet. Not as a promise, just as a possibility. And for the first time, both of them understood that the contract was no longer the most powerful thing holding them together, or keeping them apart. The next test came sooner than either of them expected. 3 days later, he asked her to attend a corporate gala in New York City, larger than the charity luncheon, more press, more scrutiny, the kind of event where reputation was currency and every gesture would be examined. You do not have to go, he told her that morning. I can attend alone. She looked at him for a long moment. No, she said. If I am your wife, then I will stand beside you, but this time I will not disappear. He nodded once. Understood. That night, the ballroom glowed with white light and crystal chandeliers. Cameras lined the entrance. Reporters called his name as soon as they stepped onto the carpet. She walked beside him, steady, composed, aware of every eye on her. Inside, the atmosphere shifted quickly. Board members, investors, people who smiled too much and spoke too carefully. Conversations overlapped, polite and sharp at the same time. Then she saw her, his former wife. The woman stood near the center of the room, elegant and confident, her hand resting lightly on the arm of another man. She was laughing, unbothered, as if she had never walked away from the life she once shared with him. Her presence alone was enough to change the temperature of the room. Whispers followed. She felt them before she heard them. That is her. I did not expect her to show up. So that is the replacement? Replacement. The word hit harder than she expected. His former wife approached them with a smile that did not reach her eyes. Well, she said pleasantly, this is unexpected. He remained calm. You were invited. I assumed you would come. Her gaze shifted to his current wife, slow and assessing. You must be the one who signed the contract, she said lightly. Efficient, very on brand for him. The room seemed to hold its breath. Her husband did not speak. This time she did. I did not sign anything blindly, she said evenly, and I am not here to be compared. The woman tilted her head. Are you sure? Because that is how it always starts. A few people nearby listened closely now. She felt the familiar pull to retreat, to stay quiet, to let him handle it. But something inside her refused. I am not your past, she continued calmly, and I am not a solution to be measured. The former wife smiled thinly. You sound confident for someone standing on borrowed ground. That was when it happened. Her husband reached for her hand, fully, openly, without hesitation. His fingers interlaced with hers, firm and deliberate, grounding her in place. This is not borrowed ground, he said clearly. This is my wife. The words carried. Cameras turned. Conversations stopped. The moment crystallized in front of dozens of witnesses. His former wife stiffened. Since when? She asked. Since I chose her, he replied. He did not look away. He did not loosen his grip. For the first time since she had known him, there was no distance in his posture, no control in his tone, only certainty. She felt her chest tighten. This was not for appearances. This was a choice. The former wife stepped back, her expression carefully neutral. I see, she said. Good luck then. She turned and walked away. Slowly, the room returned to motion. Conversations resumed. Music swelled. But something had shifted permanently. Her husband did not release her hand, not when they walked through the room, not when they spoke to donors, not when cameras flashed. Later, away from the crowd, she finally spoke. You crossed the line, she said quietly. Yes, he replied. That was not in the contract. I know. She looked at their joined hands. Why? She asked. He squeezed her fingers gently. Because tonight, he said, I was not protecting an image. I was protecting you. For the first time, she did not pull away. And in that single, public, undeniable moment, The marriage that had existed only on paper began to transform into something real, something neither of them could undo. The drive home from the gala was silent, not the cold silence she had known before, but something heavier, charged. Every mile felt like a question neither of them knew how to ask yet. When they entered the house, he did not head for his study as usual. He stopped in the foyer, loosened his tie, and turned to face her. "We need to talk," he said. She nodded. "Yes, we do." They moved into the living room, standing across from each other with the same careful distance that had defined their marriage. Only now, the distance felt fragile. He reached into his jacket and removed something folded neatly in half. The contract. He placed it on the table between them. "For 2 years," he said, "this document decided everything. Where we slept, how we spoke, what we were allowed to feel." She watched him closely, unsure where this was going. "I told myself it was protection," he continued, "control disguised as caution. But tonight made something clear to me." She waited. "I did not hold your hand because people were watching," he said. "I did it because the idea of letting you stand there alone felt wrong." Her throat tightened. "That was the first honest thing I have done in a long time." He opened the contract, flipping through the pages slowly, deliberately. Each clause passed under his fingers as if he were seeing it for the first time. "No emotional expectations," he read quietly. "No physical contact. Marriage for appearance only." He closed the document. "I cannot keep hiding behind this," he said. "Not after tonight, not after what I felt." She crossed her arms, steadying herself. "And what exactly did you feel?" He met her eyes. "Fear." The word surprised her. "Fear of losing control?" she asked. "No," he replied. "Fear of losing you." The room seemed to hold its breath. "I built this marriage to make sure I would never be abandoned again," he continued. "But somewhere along the way, I forgot that avoiding loss is not the same as choosing love." She stepped closer, still careful not to touch him. "You hurt me," she said honestly. "Not intentionally, but deeply." "I know," he said, "and I am not asking you to forgive me." He picked up the contract again. "I am asking you to choose," he said, "freely, without obligation." Her heart pounded. "What does that mean?" she asked. He looked down at the pages one last time, then tore them cleanly in half. The sound was sharp, final. Then he tore them again, and again. He dropped the pieces onto the table. "There is no contract anymore," he said. "No rules forcing you to stay. No agreement binding you to me." She stared at the torn paper, emotions colliding inside her. "If you walk away," he said quietly, "I will understand. You owe me nothing." She swallowed. "And if I stay?" His voice softened. "Then it will be because you want to, and because I am willing to learn how to be a husband in every sense of the word." Silence stretched between them. She thought about the woman she had been when she signed that contract. Tired, afraid, desperate to protect someone she loved. She thought about the woman she was now, standing, seen. Finally given a choice, she reached out slowly, stopping just short of touching him. "I will not stay in a marriage where I am invisible," she said. "You will not be," he replied without hesitation. "I will not accept protection without partnership. I will give you both. I will not be owned," she finished. "I do not want to own you," he said. "I want to stand beside you." Her hand trembled slightly as she closed the final distance between them and rested her palm against his chest. Not an embrace, not yet, a test. He did not move, did not reach for her. He let her choose. For the first time since their wedding day, the future was not written on paper. It waited quietly between them, and this time, whatever came next would be real. Morning light filled the house in a way it never had before. Not because the walls had changed or the rooms were different, but because something inside them had finally shifted. She woke slowly, aware of the quiet, aware of the unfamiliar sense of calm. There had been no dramatic night, no rushed promises. After tearing the contract apart, they had simply stood there, letting the weight of that choice settle. For the first time, there was nothing forcing them forward. Later that morning, she found him in the kitchen. He stood by the counter, sleeves rolled up, awkwardly attempting to make breakfast. The sight stopped her in her tracks. In 2 years, she had never seen him here at this hour, let alone cooking. "I was not sure what you like," he said when he noticed her, "so I made options." She smiled faintly. That is a start. They ate together at the same side of the table, not across from each other, not in silence. The conversation was simple, unguarded, filled with pauses that felt comfortable instead of strained. After breakfast, he hesitated, then gestured toward the hallway. "There is something I want to show you," he said. He led her to the other wing of the house, to his bedroom. The door was open. "I have not slept here since last night," he said quietly. "I did not want to assume anything." She stepped inside, taking in the room she had avoided for 2 years. It was not intimidating, just human. Books by the bed, a photo turned face down on the dresser, evidence of a life she had never been invited into. "You do not have to come in," he added. She turned to him. "I want to." That night, there was no rush, no pressure. They shared the space, not the bed. They talked until the city lights dimmed outside the windows, about mistakes, about fear, about what they both wanted now that no contract stood between them. When she finally reached for his hand, it was her choice. He closed his fingers around hers gently, reverently, as if afraid the moment might disappear if he held too tightly. Weeks passed. Their marriage no longer lived in performance or obligation. It grew in small, deliberate ways. Shared meals, honest conversations, quiet laughter, trust built slowly, with care. At a public event weeks later, someone asked how long they had been married. 2 years, he answered. She added, but only recently together. He looked at her then, pride unmistakable in his eyes. Later that evening, in the same living room where the contract had once been torn apart, he knelt in front of her, holding a simple ring. "This is not an agreement," he said. "This is a choice, every day. Will you marry me again?" Tears filled her eyes as she nodded. "Yes," she said, this time for real. Their second wedding was small, no press, no contracts, just promises spoken freely. And when they returned home that night, walking hand in hand through a house that finally felt like theirs, she understood something she had not known 2 years earlier. Love did not begin when he finally touched her. It began when he let go of control, and in doing so, chose her.